There's been a ton of talk about voting recently. The EU parliamentary elections are currently in progress, and the UK just held a whole bunch of local elections, and some people are still discussing the possibility of holding a second referendum on Brexit. With all this election talk, it makes sense to discuss the way that people are actually voting. To make this video, we travelled to Estonia to speak to the experts and government officials about how the system works in their high-tech government. This obviously wasn't cheap, so a quick thanks to our Patreons whose support made this possible. Also, if you want to support our future videos, especially if you're from Estonia, then check out our latest limited edition merch design, Estonia with shoes. That's available for 1 month only, and there's a link in the description. In most countries, voting includes heading to a polling station of some kind, whether that's putting a cross in a box, using an electronic system, or using your fingerprint. A few countries are trying something different and moving towards i-voting, not to be confused with electronic voting or e-voting. I-voting is pretty uncommon and refers to the ability to vote via the internet without having to go to a polling station. E-voting is different and refers to any sort of electronic voting. So for example, the electronic voting machines that they have in some polling stations in the US. Electronic voting actually happens in a lot of countries, but very few countries have adopted internet voting. In fact, the only country in the world to have properly taken it up is Estonia. Estonia first trialled i-voting in 2005 for local municipal elections. It went so well that in 2007, Estonia became the first country in the world to use internet voting for a national parliamentary election. And they continue to use internet voting for every election since.
So my name is Katrin Nyman-Metcalf and I am the Program Director for Legal Issues and Research at the E-Governance Academy. I'm also a Professor of Law at Tallinn University of Technology. We're the only country in the world where you can vote online. There have been other countries that have allowed it, but nobody else has done it for all elections. There were some in Switzerland, there were some referenda, and in Norway they tried it in some local elections. But I think it was in a way a logical consequence of doing everything online. The history is interesting because we started really early, so we had a lot of things already in the mid-1990s, and then you have to remember we became re-independent in 91, so it was almost straight away after that. So a lot of countries sort of said you can't do this in Estonia. I mean, you're small, you're poor, and I mean, you're trying to go faster than everybody else. Fortunately, we had politicians and people in administration who ignored this advice. So for us, probably it seems less dramatic and innovative than it may do for others, because when you're doing basically your communication with the state electronically, why not also vote electronically? There seems to be sort of no reason for not doing it.
Voters were originally sceptical and preferred to stick to pen and paper, with only 3.4% of votes being cast online in 2007. However, Estonians have come to trust online voting more and more. And in the most recent parliamentary elections, which happened in March of this year, 44% of votes were cast electronically.
So my name is Siim Sikkut. I'm the government CIO in the Republic of Estonia. Not everybody still votes online. Actually, about a third of people only do. But it's really a nice and more convenient way. And what we have seen is that that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen voter turnout decrease like it's happening in many countries.
It's giving people a choice, and I don't think that will disappear. I don't think it should disappear. Quite a lot of people vote in person, not because they don't know how to use e-voting. It's a kind of a nice tradition. You dress up perhaps a bit nicely and you go, and then maybe you go and have a coffee afterwards and so on.
So how does it work? Well, the whole process is enabled by Estonia's ID cards, which are known as smart cards. Basically, as well as being a normal ID card, each ID also carries a unique digital signature. In 2007, you had to have a special ID card reader, which you plug into your computer before voting. You then insert your ID card and launch a particular piece of software, and voila, you can cast your vote online. Since then, they've made the process easier by introducing a mobile app called Mobile ID. This allows citizens to vote online without the special card reader, just using their phone. Their system is designed not to sacrifice any voter anonymity.
When votes get counted, then basically your personal identity features are then separated from your vote, and so basically there's no way to tie them together afterwards. Plenty of different safeguards were built in.
Internet voting also allowed citizens to change their minds. Online voting opens 10 days before election day, and is open up until 4 days before.
In physical voting, is that we go behind a curtain, or we go into a booth, or we go somewhere so that nobody will actually see how we vote. That is very difficult to do when it's internet voting, because what if I sit here and vote, for instance, and my boss comes and sort of stands hanging over my shoulder and says, I'm a candidate, vote for me, and he will stand there until I vote for him. What is done then to safeguard this is the fact that you can vote many times, so you can vote again, and only one vote obviously counts, only the last vote counts. So if there is this theoretical situation, somebody is pushing you to vote in one way, you can do that, and then once you're on your own in quiet, you re-vote the way you want to.
So what are the advantages of online voting? Well, most obviously, online voting allows people who otherwise wouldn't be able to vote. This includes people who have physical disabilities, or maybe can't take time off work. Another advantage that the Estonian government likes to emphasise is that online voting means that no one has to take time off. According to them, online voting at the last election saved 11,000 days worth of work that would otherwise had to have been taken off.
In Estonia, it's not mandatory to vote, but many people still would like to. And there's a few practical obstacles to that. First of all, we are getting busier all the time. The weather can be lousy at the voting day, or basically you can just happen to be around the world. And through online voting, we have made being part of democracy more accessible and convenient for everybody.
Perhaps the greatest advantage of online voting is that it would in theory increase turnout. While the evidence is limited, because iVoting hasn't picked up anywhere apart from Estonia, it could be especially useful in getting young people more involved in politics. However, while iVoting is lovely in theory, the rest of the world hasn't picked up iVoting for good reason. While there are still some peripheral worries that iVoting trivialises the act of voting, and that it might maybe swing the vote unfairly towards the youth vote, the big concern is obviously security. Relative to the rest of the EU, Estonia is a tiny country, with a population of just over 1 million people, and an acting voter population of only about 500,000 people. It's a pretty politically neutral state, without many big enemies, so there's less chance of a global superpower expending much energy trying to disrupt its political process. However, if they did, iVoting might make Estonia more vulnerable. Despite the Estonian government's best efforts, independent groups have consistently found Estonia's internet voting system to be susceptible to cyber attacks.
Our approach has been that the risks that are out there are exactly to be managed. You have to manage them well, but again, they can be managed. So for example, the biggest risk that remains is not actually hacking or anything like that from our point of view. All the process of voting, everything around it, the software so far, are heavily monitored, as it goes on, that there wouldn't be any intrusions happening. Just like you have observers for the physical voting in polling stations, we have observers for the online voting and the counting of those votes, and that everything sort of works out in the right way.
If there is any doubt that this is actually properly done, and any doubt that it could be sort of manipulated, I think that would really mean a huge problem for the system. It's definitely something people from other countries have problems with, because there are constantly people trying to hack into it or trying to break it, and there's also quite a lot of academic articles about it, and so some that are sort of positive, but many that are also perhaps questioning whether there aren't very many risks. And so we haven't had any problems with it. You need to have a basic trust in your political system. You need to think that there is not going to be any attempts, for instance, by the current government to manipulate the election results. If you think that, then I think you're going to think that this is being done with such a system.
A 2016 study by Oxford University found that while iVoting seemed to work well in Estonia, its functioning depends on building trust through interpersonal relations within government, and that it could never be completely secure against cyber attacks. Also, Estonia is in a rather unique situation. They've had a unique system of smart ID cards for nearly 2 decades, putting them ahead of other governments technologically. They've had a decent amount of experience in this area, and had the chance for citizens to get used to the system and for trust to grow. Replicating this quickly across other countries could prove more difficult. So this is why iVoting hasn't picked up much traction outside of Estonia. While it does save time and money, iVoting is still ultimately less secure than old-fashioned pen and paper. Norway actually trialled iVoting in 2011 and 2013, but decided to discontinue it after voters raised concern about security, and it failed to make much difference in increasing turnout. However, this might all change with the advent of blockchain technology. The security of blockchain means that Australia, Russia, and South Korea have all announced plans to develop a blockchain-based voting system, but it's still yet to be seen whether or not this will actually happen. Even if the technology were secure, if the public doesn't like the idea, then there'll be no political will to turn iVoting into a reality outside of Estonia. As I said, Estonia is a remarkably tech-savvy place, with its smart cards, e-government, and e-citizenship. So Estonians are pretty relaxed with the idea of internet voting. But it's unlikely that other electorates, say in the UK, will be as relaxed about the idea. Do you actually like the idea? We have a poll on our Instagram story to find out what you think about iVoting. Have your say and we'll share the results very soon. Find it and share your opinion at TLDR News UK. Thank you to everyone who made this video possible. Special thanks to the people we interviewed in Estonia, and Adam Rang and Abdul Toure, who organised all of the interviews we conducted. Also, I'd like to thank all of you who've donated to TLDR through Patreon or PayPal. We weren't paid to go to Estonia, and while we were invited by Estonian government officials, we didn't allow them to pay for our trip. There's more information about this at tldrnews.co.uk/funding. Because we footed the bill, we relied on the income from this channel to pay for the trip. Having regular supporters and donors means that we have a more diversified income stream, and we aren't as reliant on YouTube revenue, which is unpredictable and ever-changing. If you'd like to support us making more independent news content, then maybe consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. You can find the links to both in the description.